There we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 8 of Material Issues with David Bash of International Pop Overthrow Festival and yours truly, Mark Hershberger of the Allentown Peanuts Baseball Club. We established that in 1898. I'm getting old, but Pop Detective Records is one of my claims to fame, and we've been doing. Wow, David, we've been doing. This is episode number 8. That's hard to believe already that we've got 7 episodes in our pocket. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Mr. David Bash.
I'm surprised the equivalent of the FCC hasn't kicked us off by now. That's why I'm surprised we're at number 8.
Yeah, well, really. I mean, I know people talk about episodes. They've done 100, they've done 200. I am surprised. I mean, it just seems like last week we started episode number 1 for fun, and then it got rolling with some great special guests. You know, we had Sal Almeida, we had Lisa Michaels, we had Fernando Perdomo. I just like to say Fernando Perdomo. Well, that was an awesome episode as well. A lot of great episodes, and we've got more to come in the future. So make sure you subscribe to the Facebook, join the Facebook group, subscribe to the YouTube channel, do whatever you have to do. Tell your friends, share it. Kurt Vance is saying, hi, guys. He always checks in. We appreciate it.
Hey, Kurt. Thanks for checking in.
Yes, indeed. And make sure you check back every week because we've got some great stuff coming up in the future we're excited about. And that's what makes this show a lot of fun. Not only do David and I just have a great time talking with each other, but the guests are incredible. And if you're a music fan, a power pop fan, you already know. So tonight, David, is going to be about just you and I.
It's really about time because the last few episodes we've interviewed people and they've been so good. All you've had to do is pretty much wind them up and they talk and talk and talk, which was, made our job a lot easier. But it meant that we had no airtime essentially. So I figured it's time that we got some.
It's absolutely right. It's absolutely fascinating.
Today we're going to interview each other.
Well, we did each other before going on live as far as the questions are concerned. No. The questions.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We really don't even know what we're going to talk about tonight. We're just going to let it roll and have fun. So we're going to just kind of half and half. I'm going to ask David some questions, and he's going to ask me some questions. And if anybody has any questions that you want to pop up in the comment section about either one of us, let it fly. Let us know who you are, because we got a new one here. It said Facebook user, I'm finally on time. Good evening, gentlemen. And we're not really sure who that is.
Good evening to you too, sir.
Good evening. We are live. I can probably see who that is. Oh, it's good
evening to you too.
Magnus. Vic.
We are live. I can probably see who that is.
I'm turning the volume down there. So Magnus Gulbrandsen from Dahlman's fame and some solo fame. Is
okay.
John Kirby checked in. We got a bunch of people checking in. So
no. One wouldn't expect anything different from you, John.
All right, David, here we go.
That would be pay-per-view, John. And
yeah,
for you anyway. I don't know. We'd let everyone else in free, but you're
for
paying.
John only. But Magnus, man, wherever you are, I miss you, buddy, and hope all is well with you and the family. That's fantastic. So, David, start at the beginning.
All righty then. Well, it was a cold, dark night in December of 1957, Poughkeepsie, New York. My mommy and daddy were there, and daddy said to mommy, "Baby, I'm warm for your form." And nine months later, I was there. Either that or they went to the local pound and bought me. I don't know. It's one of the two things. Anyway, let's see. From then on, I gurgled, I belched, I crawled, I walked, I talked. And there you have it.
Where were you born? Were you born in New York?
No, I was born in Poughkeepsie, New York. Yeah.
Poughkeepsie, New York. Very good. Yeah. Yeah.
Lived there until I was 13 and then moved down to New City, which is in Rockland County, New York, much closer to Manhattan. I lived there till I was 23, then moved to Southern California, and have lived there more or less the whole time.
Right.
With
Right.
one little departure to Bakersfield.
Well, what has turned David Bash into David Bash? What was your childhood like? Was it full of music? Was it sitting in your room studying hard? What type of person were you as a little one?
Well, intellectually, I developed pretty quickly, so I didn't have to study hard for it. And I'm not bragging. I'm actually doing this to illustrate a point. The phone is ringing, and it's someone I would
Pizza Hut.
actually like to speak with, but I'm not going to do it.
Pizza Hut's
well.
verifying your order.
Well, it means this person's not watching the show. Shame on you. Anyway, I was just going to illustrate a point about development. Intellectually, I developed very quickly, but ultimately, the other kids caught up, and well, not everybody caught up, but some did. But the problem was I never developed really good study habits. So while my grades were excellent as a child, they got a little bit worse as I got into high school because, I just didn't. I just became kind of lazy, so didn't really study much. I ended up with a B+ high school average. I was very much an underachiever, but see, that's what happens when you don't work. So I didn't.
I mean, does that happen because you come out of the gates pretty fast and you're very good at it young, and you get a little bored with it because everybody else hasn't caught up yet, and then once they all catch up, you've already become complacent, and then they fly by you. Why do I say that? Exact same thing happened with me.
Yes. So there you have it.
There's probably a lot of things we have in common that you and I both go, yeah, exactly. So that's why we've been friends.
We're both failed prodigies. That's right.
Exactly.
So, anyway, was there a lot of music? Not at first. My parents weren't into rock and roll at all. My dad was from Israel. Came here about 7 years before I was born. And my mom was born in New York, but she was a little bit older than the average kid when rock and roll came out, and the average kid who was into it. And so it was never her thing. My parents liked show tunes a lot, and other adult performers like Perry Como and Jerry Vale and people like that.
All the best, yeah.
I was the oldest in the family, so I didn't have any siblings I didn't have that Almost Famous experience where an older sister left her record collection to me. Nothing like that. And I didn't have a whole lot of friends at school. I could say who were into music, but I have to leave it at that. I didn't have a whole lot of friends. So any musical taste I had, I developed on my own. And I started listening to the local radio station, WABC in New York, 77 WABC. Sorry about that. And I really got into that partially because I love the music. It was, a lot of people here know what late 60s, early 70s, top 40 radio sounds like. And I was very into it. Plus, I was into the charts. I was always really good at math, and I liked the idea of songs rising and falling on the charts. It intrigued me. That's why I got into baseball also. It wasn't so much that I wanted to play it. I looked at the back of baseball cards and was like, wow, look at these numbers. What do they mean? And then when I would figure out what they meant, it became even cooler. And I wanted to be part of what created those numbers. So a lot of what I like in either directly or indirectly derived from my love for math and numbers.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, all of my music exploration was on my own completely. Like I said, no real help. And that's how it was pretty much in my, late grade school, early high school years. And ultimately, I started listening to a little bit of FM radio, some album-oriented stations, and that's what really got me into starting to collect records. I didn't know much about albums up until the mid 70s. So anything that I listened to would be on 45s, as we called them then.
Yeah, single. Yeah.
Then I started getting into albums, and it was like, what a world that opened up. I couldn't believe how many great songs there were back there. And
So
in 1974, I didn't have a turntable yet. I did have something that played cassettes. I had $20, and my mom and I were at a mall, and I had a choice. Well, I made it a choice between two things I could spend the money on: either the Red and Blue album by the Beatles on cassette, or a stopwatch. And my love of watches. Well, it started even then.
I couldn't predict this one right here. Which way's it going to go?
I had a hard time too, so I actually asked my mom, "What should I do?" And she said, "Well, the Beatles' music is really timeless and always will be." She wasn't a fan, but she knew that. And I said, "You're right." So I went and bought the cassettes. And, I bought a few more cassettes, mostly best ofs. But even that opened me up. Even there, I would hear some songs and it was like, wow, that was them. I remember hearing, well, this is going to sound weird, but I remember hearing With a Little Help from My Friends, which was on the Blue album. And I said, that's the Beatles? I thought it was Petula Clark because I saw her do it on a special.
Right.
I figured it was her song. I hadn't heard it on the radio.
Right.
So, yeah, it was kind of a lot of eye-opening stuff. Well, it got to the point where
everybody was covering Beatles on every variety hour show or whatnot. And you were, if you didn't know, you'd be like, hey, that's a great song. Yeah, I got to run out and get Petula Clark's new album.
Well, I never did. At that point, I didn't because I was too young. But ultimately, it got to the point, this is 1975 now, where I said, I really need to get a turntable. I'd already, funny enough, I'd already subscribed to Columbia Record Club. I think a friend of mine talked me into it, and it was hard to resist when you got 18 records for a penny or whatever. Right. I was way too naive to realize that they were going to stick me later with like $17 for albums I don't want. So I had the 18 albums for a penny, and I said to my mom, I really need to get a turntable. And she said, well, are you really going to buy a lot of records? And I said, don't worry, Mom, I will. So the same mom who told me to buy the Beatles kind of warned me against buying a turntable, but I did it anyway. And before she knew it, I think within a year I had about 1,000 LPs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Now, where were you getting the money for this? Is that coming from your parents, or did you do something for money?
Let's see, prostitution, fake IDs.
Again, where do you get the money?
I'm telling you, there's a lot of money in fake IDs. Prostitution was tough for some reason. An overweight 16-year-old boy wasn't in much demand, but I did what I could.
Not until at least 1978. Yeah.
Right. No. My dad was a very interesting person. He could be a disciplinarian if he needed to be, but he could also be very permissive. And with money, he was pretty permissive. So, yeah, I had a pretty good allowance. And, plus I also worked for him for a few years during the summer. So I amassed a little bit of money, and I spent it all on records and never regretted it.
Right. And do you still have a lot of those original records in your collection, or have they gone by the wayside with moves and things?
Good question. In 1993, I sold a lot of my records. At that point, CDs were, I was much more into CDs for a lot of different reasons. And also I needed some cash. So I sold most of my record collection, kept what wasn't on CD that I really wanted, converted a lot of what I did want to CDs, and went that route. So by 1993, I had about 4,500 LPs. I sold about 4,000 of them. But by now I have well over 10,000 CDs. So I don't regret too much having gotten rid of some. Some I do, believe me, but others, not so much.
So I'm gonna think that your preferred um, media would be CD.
It still is, yeah, but I love vinyl again. And if I like an album now, if I really like it, I'll buy both CD and LP.
I mean, it's funny because you and I both grow up kind of the same age range and whatnot. I can remember cassettes. I can remember 8 tracks. I had tons of 8 tracks, and trust me, you had to carry a suitcase with you anywhere you went when you had all those 8 tracks. 8-track player in the car, and you'd be rocking out to some song, and then it would hit the middle of the track and go, and then the song would fade back up again. Drove me out of my mind. But then
my parents had an 8-track player in their car. At first we were listening to the soundtrack from MAME and Paul Anka records. So it was like, when we'd take family trips, it was like, okay, can I please get a few records I like? So I remember getting Caribou by Elton John, and what else did we have? Maybe a couple other Elton John albums. I was at that point I was so into him that I wanted to buy all his stuff. May have had McCartney Ram. I don't remember. Well, we had a few 8-track rock things, and I do remember what you're talking about. The songs. So what was my first 45? Good question. May have been Hey Jude, actually. At that point, every Beatles single was on Apple. And I think my first 45, I wanted to make the most of it. So I figured I'd get something that was 7 minutes long. So there you have it.
Wow. I don't even think I could remember my first 45.
You don't remember your first?
My first 45.
Have you had your first yet?
It might have been Smith & Wesson. I don't know.
Mine was, let me see.
Remington.
Johnson & Johnson, maybe? I don't know. That was my first, second, third, ... 101st, 102nd.
Good question, John. So, I mean, we've kind of skipped forward to CDs a little fast, but your high school years.
We can scale it back.
We can scale it back.
You want to ask me some other earlier stuff? I don't know. Whatever.
I'm talking about your high school years. I mean, again, was it like your young years? You weren't that much involved in friends and things? Did you play any instruments? What were you like in high school?
Yeah. I'm David Bash, and I'm a geekaholic. I actually was a geekaholic because I sought out other geek friends.
Now, were you like Freaks and Geeks television show type of geek? Were you a cool geek, or were you just kind of?
No, I was not one of the freaks. I did, and there were a lot of reasons for it. I could go back into the psychology of it all, but this is only a 30-minute interview. So let's just say I was unpopular for a number of reasons, none of which I deserved, because I was a nice kid. I never wanted to. Oh, there, yeah. It's too bad you did that, George, because some of them are worth some bucks now. Anyway, I was a good kid. I never wanted to hurt anybody's feelings. I was very sensitive. But some of the other kids weren't that way, and so it was kind of tough on me. Of course, the other geeks could, they could empathize. We commiserated a lot about stuff like that. So we had things. Plus we did have a lot in common, stuff that kids do at home, not outside. We could talk about. Oh, there you go, John. Anyway,
did you ever wish you played an instrument though? Looking back at your youth, did you ever feel like playing something, piano, guitar?
That's a great question, because when I was in 4th grade, we were offered being able to take a musical instrument class. Guitar wasn't offered, but clarinet was the one I thought was the coolest. So I took clarinet, and my teacher, Mr. McIntosh, was a real stickler for doing homework and doing everything by the book. I was not that way, and in fact, not only did I not do the homework assignments, but I used to skip ahead in the book and say, I want to try this. And I was playing some really cool notes that the other kids weren't playing, but I wasn't doing the homework.
Yeah.
And, I would come in and say, Mr. McIntosh, look, and I would play this stuff, and he'd say, you're not ready for that. Why aren't you doing the homework? And that totally discouraged me. I ended up just I don't know if I was able to drop out of the class in fourth grade, but I may have. I don't remember that much. But anyway, it turned me off on wanting to learn an instrument. When I was in high school, I kind of thought I might want to learn to play guitar, but it never went further than the thought. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
no, I mean, if I had had a teacher that was a little more free thinking and open minded, I probably would have. Maybe I'd be a jazz guy by now. Who knows?
How about singing? I've seen you on IPO stages singing along with some artists that have called you up and things. Did you sing at all in high school, or did you?
I actually was in the Glee Club in grade school. But
there you go.
Here's a story, too. I had a really good singing voice when I was a kid. And not only that, I had an ear. A bunch of us, well, all of the students in fourth grade, I think, we had a test where the music teacher would play pairs of notes. And you had to be able to tell whether they were identical or different. And obviously they were, the different ones were very minutely different. Only me and this other David Schock, were the only kids in the class to get 50 out of 50. So that also, and that's probably why I have the ear I have now. It's probably why I can pick out all kinds of nuances in songs, chord changes, everything. And that's why, and they really resonate with me. So yeah, I was in Glee Club, but I can't for the life of me know exactly why, but maybe I started getting nervous. Although I sang in performances that we did, and I seemed to do okay, but something caused me to sort of laugh uncontrollably at times and maybe misbehave a little bit. Long story short, I got kicked out of the Glee Club. And I didn't mind that much. So I must have known I was asking for it. But something about it, I don't know. But yeah, I was good. Yeah, I was good.
I was too gleeful.
No, I remember. In fact, when they tested us out, I went up with this other kid, Tommy Catanzaro, a pretty cool, nice guy, great athlete, couldn't sing a note. I'm singing, and he's singing like this, da 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 da, and I'm thinking, man, he sucks. Does that mean? But am I good? Compared to him, I was, and I got selected, and he didn't. So obviously, maybe he made me look better.
Could be, right? So did you, when you were in high school, mid-70s, did you know you were a power pop fan? Did you realize the guitar-driven melody kind of music, harmonies was your thing, or were you listening to all sorts of stuff?
Well, in the beginning of high school, I was still listening primarily to AM radio. So I was listening to all kinds of stuff. And there were no labels. I mean, it was all, like I like to tell people, in the early 70s, you could hear Johnny Cash, followed by the Carpenters, followed by Led Zeppelin, followed by the Jackson 5 on WABC or whatever other AM radio station was happening. And it was all music. All right, they called the Jackson 5 soul. They called Led Zeppelin rock. They called Johnny Cash country. They called the Carpenters maybe easy listening. But we didn't really think that much about those labels. Yeah. It all kind of fit. So, yeah, I was listening to a variety of things at that point. I know that once I got into album rock, things narrowed a little bit, but not completely. It didn't all become rock and pop. So as far as power pop went, I never thought of it that way. I loved No Matter What. Right. I loved Go All the Way, and I loved anything else that, would ultimately become classic power pop. But I never even heard the term until probably the late 70s.
Right.
And I didn't really think much of it even then. It wasn't until I looked back at some Bomp issues and saw Greg Shaw had written about it that I really kind of embraced the term. But I don't remember what I used to I think we just called it all pop. Like when I heard Shoes for the first time, I never thought power pop. I thought this is just great pop.
Right.
So it was all pop. I mean, Supertramp was pop. 10cc was pop. Shoes were pop. Cheap Trick was pop. Anything with good melodies that had any relation to rock and roll, that was pop.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think at the time it was just it was music. You knew some things were country-ish. You knew some things were what even operatic, Queen, things like that. But all of it was just pop or rock, or it was just a thing. I really didn't start to understand the compartmentalization of things until into really the 80s, and you started hearing, well, this is skinny tie, and this is this, or this is that, and then you start saying, oh, okay, well, now I got to lump it all into a certain category if I want to talk about it. I guess I don't know. It really did change for me, kind of on that cusp of the 70s into the 80s.
Yeah, I kind of blame MTV for a lot of this. Not only did video kill the radio star, it killed the homogenization of genres, and it separated them all. And of course, they kind of got their comeuppance in that great David Bowie interview that Mark Goodman did, where Bowie asked him, "So why aren't you playing any black artists?" And he was not ready for that question. He was completely blindsided, and he mumbled something about, well, our audience, it's not the right target audience or something. And Bowie said, "Oh, really?" I don't think that's true. And Goodman mumbled something else, and Bowie said, "Yeah, okay," with a smirk. Well, it wasn't long after that they started playing Michael Jackson videos, and then a bunch of others. So fragmented radio program, there was that too. Absolutely.
That's cool. So you did the college thing. You went to college up in New York.
I started college at Syracuse University, stayed there for a year and a half, transferred to NYU, and graduated there in 1981. And and this is something you'll be able to relate to. It was at Syracuse University. Your buddy Keith Raddick, you remember him?
Yeah,
he and I were good friends. We met at Syracuse.
Wow.
One day I picked up the Syracuse newspaper. This was in March of 1977. And at that point, I was really immersed into album rock, because they had the Syracuse radio station played all kinds of album stuff. I was turned on to so many amazing bands from listening to that. Bands like Barclay James Harvest and Boston and Ambrosia and people like that, and many others.
Right.
And so I was already kind of into prog. And then I read this article in the Syracuse paper about this band called Clay Tube. That's how I thought it was pronounced. Why, I don't know. I should have known double A didn't mean A, right? But somehow I called them Clay Tube.
Yeah.
And, about how, they were rumored to be the Beatles and nobody knew and blah, blah, blah. And I remember I ran to the local record store and bought the self-titled or 347 album. And I brought it to my dorm room, and I said, "Hey, Keith, you got to hear this." So we're going in there and we're listening to it, and we're both like Beavis and Butthead. We're like saying, "It is them. It is them. Listen to that chord. Listen to that vocal. Oh my God, it's them. Listen to that message that in Little Neutrino. Listen to, and you'll never know." Yeah, that's right. We'll never know. It's real. Is it you or not? We're all tripping over ourselves. It was so geeky. And it wasn't until one of the older kids, I brought this to his attention, and one of the older kids said, "Yeah, I know all about this. It's not the Beatles. It's these Canadian musicians." So somebody went to Washington and looked up a patent or something and found out that who it really was. And it's like, oh man, I feel like such an idiot. That didn't turn me off to Clay Tube, though. I think by then I knew it was Clay Tube, but I started, when Hope came out, I bought it immediately, and everything else, of course, after that.
Yeah, indeed.
But yes, I don't know. See, this is what I love about these interviews: complete digressions, and it's great.
It's all right. It makes it fun. But all right, so you got through all that. Now you how do you end up in Southern California?
I at the time I was still living at home. I graduated NYU with a degree in journalism. I I was a little bit aimless at the time. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had worked for a magazine for a while, and it was a little discouraging. So wasn't sure. My dad had some really good business opportunities in California. He was in real estate. The real estate market in New York was really crapping out. And in California, there was so much opportunity. So he moved us out there. And at that point, my mom said, you know what, you should, you have a mind for psychology. You seem to enjoy it. Why don't you go back and get your psychology degree? It's like, yeah, good idea. So I did that. Went and got my bachelor's and master's at University of California, Irvine. Taught psychology for 7 years, which was great for 7 years. And then I got a bit burnt out. As you can tell, I don't necessarily stick with stuff, but now I do, because that takes us into IPO. But I see that our time is up. Why don't we save the IPO years for next time?
Okay, we can save the IPO years for the next time that we take a break from guests, and we'll pick it up from that point and
absolutely
go forward. Yeah, indeed. Well, that was wonderful getting to know David Bash, the younger years, the pre IPO years, or prepo as we call it. But
so now it's time. Thank you. So now it's time for the Mark Hershberger interview. And like they do in chess, sometimes when somebody goes like King Pawn 4, and then the other player goes in kind, I will do this. I will do the same thing. So, Mark Hershberger, how did it all begin?
Well, I was born to a poor black family in Memphis, and
I can see that.
No, actually, there's a lot of people that know, but I was born in York, PA, and immediately put up for adoption. I'm adopted. Spent the first 11 months of my life in foster care, kind of why it's felt so good to foster a doggy of my own 6 months ago and whatever. But yeah, I spent 11 months in foster care, which is really funny because we talked earlier before we went live about not remembering certain things in life, but having vivid memories of other things. There are people that can verify certain memories that I have from foster care. And they're like, how do you even have that in your mind? How do you know this? And so it's kind of interesting. But yeah, my parents were told after they had been married for 8 to 10 years that one of the two of them was not fertile and couldn't have children. So they went and picked me out of a lineup, and they said, okay, we'll take that one. And they took me home.
We'll take that one.
We'll take that one.
like you're a melon or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were all in cages, just like dogs at the kennel now. And I guess I sat in the one corner. I was sucking my thumb, and they thought I was cute. So they said, we'll take that one. And they took me home and immediately renamed me Mark. And it's funny, I had talked to my dad many times about where did the name Mark come from? Because 3 years later, 3 years later.
I think it's Marcus, actually.
No, Marcus. 3 years later, they were told they couldn't have kids, so they were just going about their merry way thinking, this is fun, we don't need to do anything protection-wise. And boom, my brother was born. And
wow.
Yeah, that was a surprise. And they named my brother Richard Allen. His first name came from the doctor that was their best friend that delivered him, Richard, and his middle name was Allen after my mom's brother.
You mean it wasn't Richie Allen from the Phillies?
Well, that's what I thought. I thought obviously it was Richie Allen of the Phillies. And they said, no, it was this. I said, well, then where did Mark come from? And they both looked at me one day and they went, we don't know. There was no reason for that. But fast forward, my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and my dad moved into a full care facility. But clearing out all the stuff that they had in storage and things, and getting rid of a lot of things, I found a massive box of love letters when my dad was in the military. They wrote each other every day, and they both saved all these letters for the 2-year period. But it was awesome. But there was one letter in there where Dad said, I met a really interesting guy the other day, and we've become very good friends. And his name is Mark. And he said, I've never really heard that name too often, but I really like that name. And that's the only time it was mentioned. And it turned out when they adopted me, they named me Mark, because something in my dad's head must have stuck with him, and that's how that came about. But
it's interesting. I don't mean to interrupt, but it's interesting because so many of my grade school male friends were named Mark.
Yeah.
So it was certainly a popular name by the late 50s.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
At least in Poughkeepsie, it was.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that it is because it's not that popular of a name anymore. But it was interesting that they just didn't remember that, and just through dumb luck, I found all those letters and found that one little blurb, and that's just really kind of cool. But yeah, I was raised initially in a very small town in South Central Pennsylvania called Spring Grove, and the claim to fame is my next door neighbor, who I played with as a tiny child all the time, was Laura Elowany, who went on to write My Girl, Macaulay Culkin movie.
Wow.
And she went on to write the Brady Bunch 2 movies and became quite something. And, I just went on to do this materialistic show.
Can't you call in a favor?
I've talked to her. I've actually talked to her because I had found pictures of her dad, Nasmi. He was in Hanover Foods or something, an executive. And my dad and mom were just good friends with the two of them. We lived on a lake, so they always had lake parties and things. It was really kind of neat growing up there. But much of that My Girl movie is all based on her childhood, with a little plot twist and whatnot, of right there, Lake Cadorus, Lake Pahajico, where I lived, which is kind of cool. And that's kind of neat. We bounced around a little bit. My dad was in the middle of getting his master's and then his PhD, so we kind of moved around and went to Camp Hill, PA, and then settled when my dad was a professor at Kutztown State College. We really settled, and most of my childhood and teen years were spent in Kutztown, between Reading and Allentown, and wonderful small town, but a college professor as a dad, college town life, wonderful. And I got into music kind of the same. But my parents were pretty cool though in the 60s. I definitely remember they always tuned the radio to whatever I was kind of digging, and some of my earliest memories were singing along to Tommy Roe's Dizzy and Jam Up and Jelly Tight, and those kind of just fun poppy things. Because most of my parents' record collection was almost like gospel. They were into the gospel quartets, which I think also helped define my sense of harmony, because it was always great harmony in a lot of those old gospel quartets, and that morphed into the Statler Brothers and things like that they really enjoyed.
Yeah, we were Jews, so we had a lot of Alan Sherman records.
But
my God, my son, the folk singer, though, I have to say, it's still funny.
Still funny. But, So I grew up in a great college town, and I started, I think the very first, I had a paper route, so I had money. I was making some money, and most kids didn't have a paper route, but I've always been one to just kind of work any way I could possibly make a buck, shoveling snow in the winter for people. And one of the very first things that I got with my own money was I saw this like 4 record set called Leader of the Pack. And it was, it was all the wonderful, great 50s, rock and roll and doo-wop and everything. And I set away for it because my mom and dad had the record player, the turntable that I could use at will. And of course, when you got it, that record was as thin as saran wrap. So within about 2 plays,
oh my God!
Within about 2 plays, it started skipping all the time, and I said, "There's got to be a better way." So, we had a record store in town, which was really neat. I mean, I could walk 2 blocks to the record store, and I started getting a few albums here and there. What it was is hard to remember early 70s, but I know mid 70s once. Clatu, or Claytu, as we did call it at the same time.
You did too?
Yes, indeed, because the Beatles were everything to me early on. I mean, I was Beatles crazy. I used to listen to AM radio as well, and I heard Badfinger, and I heard Raspberries, and all the good stuff that I just fell in love with, all that kind of thing. But when I started going to record shop downtown, I would start at A, and just start flipping and flipping and flipping and flipping. And if something caught my eye, it didn't have to be anybody I even heard of. But if the album cover was pretty freaking awesome, I'd start checking it out. And that's where Clat 2 came in. And I actually bought the first album before I even heard the Beatle rumor because I loved the Sun.
Wow.
I turned it over. There's the title of the songs, but there was no other information. And I'm like, how can this be? You can't have a record with nobody playing on it. This is not possible, you know? And I took it home and I played it to death. I mean, just played it. And then maybe a month or two, whatever it was later, I read about the Beatles rumor. And then you go back and revisit every single iota. Yeah, we know Terry Draper's still, someone just commented, Terry Draper is still making music, making great music. So go online.
Indeed he is. And he's
Terry's
played
stuff.
IPO a couple of times. And
He has
thank
played
you for that,
IPO.
Terry.
Yeah, we'll catch that. We'll cover that in the next episode.
Yeah.
It's all good. But that was kind of it. And in high school, I played in the band. Fourth grade, got my cornet, and I carried that through all through high school. My mom and dad forced me to take piano lessons, although I hated the piano. But they said it's a good basis. It's a good base. And I was like, you got to do your homework. And I was skipping forward and trying this kind of stuff. And she was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. So you and I did the same thing, basically.
Exact same thing. I was trying other stuff. I was like, listen to this chord. Bang. And I don't care what that chord is. Do your homework, smacking my fingers with a ruler. It's like, no. So, but you know what? It was a great bass in music. And then when, I got a cornet, which is like a trumpet, and I played that. Never really practiced much because I really didn't dig the trumpet, but I was digging being in the marching band, and there were a lot of good looking ladies in the marching band and the majorettes and things like that. So why not? But in high school, then sports took over, and I got into basketball and was actually pretty decent at it. I was not that serious about it. I kind of just was having some fun, but happened to be really good at it. I guess if I would have taken it more seriously, I would have played longer in college, but I screwed my knees up, and that's a long story. But I always dreamed of playing a guitar. I think we used to visit my grandparents. They lived on a huge farm in Western PA, but my dad's mom, my grandmother, lived 2 blocks up in this very tiny town of like 400 people. And I would go from my grandparents as soon as we got there. My mom and dad, my brother stayed on the farm. I'd walk up and stay with my other grandmother because she spoiled me rotten. She let me stay up and watch the midnight special. My parents never let me stay up that late. And my grandmother, God rest her soul, and thank you so much, she would say, just turn the TV off whenever you go to bed, but have at it. And my God, every time I visited her, I was staying up to watch the midnight special, and that turned me on. That opened my eyes to a lot of things, I think, Debbie Harry opened my eyes to a lot of things. Yeah.
That I'm sure. Let me just interrupt and tell a little Debbie Harry story, only because I don't want to, I don't want to lose my train of thought. But I got between when I was at Syracuse University during my winter break. So this would be late December '76. I was home listening to WNEW-FM, and they played the first Blondie album before it came out. And I was so intrigued because it's like, man, this stuff sounds like the 60s. It sounds like, the girl groups. I don't know what I called it then. But anyway, I could not wait to get the album. So when I got back to Syracuse, it was already second week of January, went to the local record shop, and there it was. And, I brought it home, to my dorm immediately. And I remember it was, I'm falling asleep. I've got my headphones on. I'm listening to this album. And Look Good in Blue comes on. And I'm probably about a quarter asleep. And I hear the line, I can give you some head. And right there, I sprung up. And I don't, you can say I sprung up 2 ways. And then I hear the end shoulders. But just in that split second, Debbie taught me a few things too.
Your life changed.
The line is, I can give you some head and shoulders to lie on, but she has this little pause.
There's a pause
between head and shoulders, and for that split second, it's like, what? Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. It's a great story, and many things about Debbie Harry and Blondie kept me up nights as well. But very much like you, when it came to school, my dad being a psychology professor and taught guidance and counseling and whatnot, he had this thing for testing my IQ every 3 or 4 years just for fun. So I had it tested like 5 or 6 times between being very young and probably 18 to 20 years old. And it always tested very high. I'm not going to talk numbers because people who do that annoy me. But, in 4th grade, the school I was in started this little test program. They called it BEEP, Burke's Educational Enrichment Program. And they took like 5 kids from your school and 5 kids from 3 or 4 other elementary schools in the greater county area. And once a week, you were taken to a facility, and in 4th grade, you were learning things on a 12th grade level. They would teach you all day long, higher whatever. And you also got acting classes, and you did the arts and things. And that continued in 5th grade and 6th grade, 3 years. Once a week, I went to another place to learn. And by 6th grade, you were learning at a senior year college level courses. Well, then it stopped. Then you stop it. Then you go to 7th grade and you're like, huh? What are we learning this baby stuff for?
I know. Yeah.
And then, that's when you start, finding other ways of expanding your mind and having a good time. And then you end up being in 10th grade going, oh shit, I should have caught up on some of this. And it makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah.
But and then I did do that. I did graduate. I played some college basketball and ended up going to Kutztown State College, which morphed into university for telecommunications, radio, television, broadcast, performance, and whatnot. And that kind of during my senior year of high school with the paper route money, I went and bought a bass guitar. Just because I loved the sound of the thumping bass, and taught myself rudimentarily how to play, and immediately got into bands, playing some of the worst stuff you can imagine. It was kind of like our own invented prog pop with lyrics from things we heard on the radio. I don't know what the hell it was, but that started my my life of playing with people and playing bands and whatnot. And early on, I got in with 2 other guys, and we formed a band called The Few in Kutztown. It was Kyle Hildenbrand. He went on to Berklee School of Music and invented the double neck guitar. Not like you would remember the 2 necks like this. He invented a guitar that had necks going like this in a V, and he could play hammer-ons with just turn the amp. It was amazing. And then the drummer was Tommy Wolf, who went on to be one of the most requested music supervisors in Hollywood. So,
wow.
He's done all the Farrelly Brothers movies, and so the 3 of us were played in that first band, and the bands I just kept playing in bands for the next 15 years or so.
You've got a lot of favors you could call in.
Got a lot of favors. Yeah.
You don't have any photos of them in compromising positions? Nothing like that?
No, I wish I did. Matter of fact, here is. Wait a second. There is The Few, and there's me. There's me.
Oh,
there's
yeah.
Tommy, and there's Kyle.
Nice.
That was the college.
What magazine is this from?
This was from a college newspaper. We played some gigs in town at some of the bars and whatnot, and the newspaper covered it. And that's in my younger, good-looking days.
Oh my God!
Playing with the agency.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all good. And that really was my love of music, was getting into bands. And The Few, we actually wrote some of our own original stuff, and we went into a studio and recorded 6 tracks for a little mini EP called Act Casual by The Few. And we figured, we're not proud, we're not Marines, but there are a few of us. that's how we got the name, The Few. But
Well, yeah, and that was a great name for the time, also, because
yes, it was. Yeah,
skinny tie bands love to have a the and then a very short,
right.
concise name.
And the few was great. And yeah, we played a lot. We played, and we actually weren't bad. We did a lot of covers of bands from like 999 and the Clash and all the stuff I used to listen to. Like we had a radio station called WZZO, and they did Rock Over London on a Friday night from like 12 midnight to 2 a.m. And you heard all this great stuff that would come out of the UK that you didn't hear anywhere else. And we loved it. So we just covered all that kind of stuff and played it loud, and people dug it at the time. It was quite a lot of fun. But
What led you to Pop Detective Records? It's a
Pop,
label mogul, people.
Pop Detective Records, which is right there. There you go. Well, we had talked before about you've written for a lot of magazines, and I started writing for Oddities magazine, which was a neat little 10 or 12 page zine, all kind of on power pop or pop whatever. And I would read that thing backwards and forwards, and I kind of dropped them an email one day, and I said, listen, would you like somebody to maybe do an article on where are they now type things? I'll try my best to find people. And what's his name? Gary
Gary and Anthony.
Gary and Anthony.
Yeah.
And they said, that'd be great. Come up with something and we'll see what happens. And I think the first one I did was I found the guys from the producers and interviewed them and sent it off. And they said, yeah, great. We're going to publish this. What do you want to call your thing? And I didn't know. And I said, how about Pop Detective? Because I'm searching for these bands. You never know where they've been. They said, great. So they invented some little logo there, called me the Pop Detective. And I did a number of those kind of articles. And then, fast forward a number of years, I put an advertisement in Goldmine magazine looking for Klaatu collectibles and 45s and things like that. And Jamie Vernon of Bullseye Records of Canada, one of my best friends in the world as well.
Great man. Yes.
Great man. He and his wife, Sharon, as I call Sharona. He answered. He had asked Sharon to marry him, but they were a little short on funds. And he answered my ad in Goldmine magazine saying, I've got a bunch of Klaatu stuff if you want to buy it. And I bought mostly all.
Sounds like he had to pay Sharon to marry him. He didn't have enough money.
Exactly. That's what it was? Exactly what happened. Right. Okay. So, that's how I got to know Jamie. Through that, and we became fast friends back when you had iPad ThinkPad dial-up modem that went, and then you had those little chat rooms. Remember those things?
Oh yeah,
and that's how you talk to people, And then Klaatu. Then Jamie was saying, "I've got Bullseye Records. I'm going to kind of bring it back and do some things. You feel like doing stuff?" And I did some things with him, and we worked with Klaatu and the Bay City Rollers and things like that, and did some tribute CDs. And in the meantime, I had interviewed the guys from Blue Ash, and that was Frank Sesich and the guys, because where are they now? And a little bit later on, Frank calls me up and says, listen, we've got this new thing going on with members of the Infidels and Blue Ash. We're going to call it the Deadbeat Poets. You want to release it? I said, release it on what? He goes, a label. I said, I don't have a label. He goes, well, start one. I said, there you go. Okay. So I actually talked to Jim Slade of Nixon's Head, who had Groove Discs Records at the time. He had a couple releases. I said, Jim, how do you start a label? And he gave me some information the best he could. And that's how it started off. And I didn't have a name for the label. And Jamie Vernon said to me, why don't you call it Pop Detective Records? Because that's what people know you as. And that's how Pop Detective kind of came into being, with the Deadbeat Poets right out of the gate. So that's my story. We got somebody saying here, has anybody heard from those Oddities guys at all?
That's John Borak, isn't it?
I do not know. Yeah, it is John Borak. No,
it's kind of an inside joke, because there was one person who I don't want to name, who we both know and love, who used to as part of his conversation with us, he'd always say, "Have you heard from so and so?" So it just became it became so automatic that we started joking about it, and then we would do it as a joke to each other. And I think one day he asked if we heard from Oddities guys. Does anyone know when that power pop? You'll have to ask Justin Fielding. Yeah, he's the director. It's been many years since he started it, and we're all waiting. I'm supposed to be an executive producer, whatever the hell that means. What it means is
it means the casting couch went badly.
Boy, did it ever on both ways. No, what it really means is Justin would bounce ideas off of me. I would give him my thoughts, and he'd do what he wanted anyway.
Is that what you call
exactly
it?
What it meant. I think that's what executive producer always means. Really, I think in Hollywood it means that everywhere. Yeah.
Oh Lord, that's funny as all heck. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into. And we can cover more of Pop Detective when we cover more of IPO down the road. But I loved playing in bands. I never sang in high school, and in fact, one gig that we played one night at Kutztown University was in front of a couple thousand people there for a big fundraising thing. And my high school music teacher, the chorus teacher, was in the crowd. And we were doing a cover of was it Conway Twitty's Make Believe? And nice. I went way up with that. What it's and she came up after me and she said, "Where the hell were you in high school?" I said, You didn't sing any of the songs I liked. So I never did it, but she paid me a nice compliment, like, holy cow. And even today, I work, a couple of nights a week in a restaurant that friends of mine own. I play guitar and I'll do Italian stuff. I'll do some opera. I'll do some things. So I've been blessed, thank the Lord, with a voice that can do a lot of different things. And besides the voiceover and stuff, we can get into that later on in another episode. But that's Pop Detective Records, man. Yeah. Yeah,
and we'll definitely expound upon that and many other things when we do the second half of each of our interviews. But yeah, we're winding down. Just to let people know, we will have some special guests for the next 2 weeks and hopefully beyond. But next week we have noted auteur and musician and all around fun guy, Mr. John Borak will be our guest.
Wait, do you
have the book there?
Say that again.
Mr. John Borak will be our guest next week on the. Yeah.
There we go.
Material issues. Do you have the book in front of you?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
All right, cool.
I don't know if anybody saw my Facebook posting today, but this just came in the mail today, and I'm going to say 3/4 of the way through. I thought I'd finish it today, but then this darn material issues thing interrupted whatnot. But there it is. Yeah. John, this is our guest next week. John Borak.
M. Borak.
John M.
John Michael Borak.
John Michael Borak. Yep. Great book. I'm assuming this is available. I think it's available directly from John, but we'll have that posted. Has anyone heard from that, John? But we'll post that next week when we interview him. But look for the Beatles 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatles History. Great book.
Yeah, I've not gotten quite as far as you, but what I've read, I've loved. John's written a few books, but this one is his best, no question. And then the following week, we're going to have members of the roster, along with the head of the wonderful label, Gem Records. I don't know exactly who we're going to have, but we will have several. We will have Marty Scott, and we'll have several of the acts. I'm hoping we'll have the members of the Gripweeds and the Anderson Council and Richard Barone and a member of the Weaklings and maybe Jonathan Pushkar.
We did talk to Lisa Michaels. We did talk to Lisa Michaels 2 weeks ago. So
I think Lisa's I think she's gonna pop in too. So that should be a lot of fun. And we're working on some other guests for the last week of July and into August. It's gonna be cool. as this show continues to grow, we're gonna get some really high echelon guests, I'm sure. Presents author unknown. What, Jason Faulkner? Are you saying we should get him as a guest? Yeah, that's a great idea. I think I'll try to do that.
That'd be awesome too.
I know Jason, so yeah, we'll try it.
But that you make a very good point. I mean, we've had some unbelievable guests already. Hard to believe that we've had such great guests so far, and the future looks very bright for wonderful guests. And I think as we keep this going on, there's going to be more and more people that would love to join us here, and we'll keep it as interesting as we possibly can. So, I thank you, David, for a really fun episode on who we are and where we came from.
Likewise, Mark.
Yeah, indeed. So, everybody have a great night. Stay happy, healthy, grateful.
Great afternoon if you're out here. Great night if you're back there. Absolutely. And stay safe.
Yeah, make sure you tell all your friends, share the Facebook group and say, hey, you got to join this group, or you got to subscribe to this YouTube channel, because it's a lot of fun. And we do appreciate all the comments and everybody joining in. So, David, have a great night.
You too, Mark. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.